Well, the aerial view, right? We can see things from a bird's eye view, from an eagle's eye, very high up. Then we can see so many things even before it happens. This is the beauty of foresight. It's the beauty of changing our lenses. Um, and I love the analogy that you gave, Chris, in regards to detoxing. On on some level, humanity is completely detoxing. And by the way, anybody who has detox know that it is not a fun ride, which is
No.
why most people don't do it. I mean, it's messy and it doesn't feel good. And there's a lot of things that can happen in our physical body. We can actually get sick by
Oh
detoxing, but
yeah.
we're actually clearing out a lot of things that are toxic within our bodies, so hence the detox. But I wanted to bring something up because, again, being that this is I'm going to say it's a controversial um, subject. It's also very, very sensitive with the mood right now, with the wars that are happening, particularly the one between Israel and Palestine and in Gaza. And it is this. I have heard so much narrative around the sides in which people pick. And I have committed to a life that is not this or that, but and another option. So if you have a cross or two swords or whatever, I know that there's always something more. And if we can look at that and say, there must be another way, there has to be some different way in which to view something, because the way in which we see things are not necessarily the truth from which our perspective is showing, right? We can't trust the media, with all due respect to some. I have a hard time really understanding or believing a lot of information that's coming through.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right, Chris? I mean, 30 people can see an accident and there's 30 different perspectives. There's 30 different encounters. There's 30 different viewpoints. Who's right? They all are. So there's something that I wanted to read to you that I heard on a podcast a couple months ago from Matthias DeStefano. And he talks about unity and oneness, and he talks about unity being the first dimension, and that from that dimension, all other dimensions are make up our reality of three dimension. And he says, in order to understand unity, we have to unlearn everything we've learned. The only way to remember is to forget everything we know. And I love that, because if we can remember who we are at the core and forget everything that we know and go into this void, into this darkness, which doesn't mean negative, but it just means darkness. It just means void of everything. We then get to start to feel how to be at the highest level of soul. And he says something here. He says, to experience unity, we must go into the void. And through feeling everything, we end up feeling neutral. That is the way to experience oneness. It's the spot of unity. It's the very first dimension. And so that kind of segues into what is neutrality? What is being neutral? So I would love to hear your definition and of what you think neutral is. And I've got a couple of things I'd like to share with the audience as well, Chris.
Yeah, it's a great topic. The first thing I thought about, and I say it all the time, so it's going to be a definite repeat here. But when I think about getting neutral, or I find about getting into oneness, the quickest fix again is just nature. Great way to get back to oneness is just to sit in nature and just listen to the sounds, feel the breeze, whatever it is, and you'll feel that oneness pretty quickly. It's a great exercise to try that, what Lisa was suggesting there. And with my definition of neutrality, yeah, it kind of just feels like something that you're almost, it's like that third option, but you don't know what the option is, so you're not going on either side almost. It's like, instead of it being this or that, it's like and maybe, or it's a that this or that are both valid. And there's probably more things that are valid within the situation, so I'm just going to stay like kind of open to all possibility and not try to lean any particular which way. And maybe until I have enough data. And even still, trying to always stay neutral is probably a solid practice in most situations, if not all, because then with time things change, and the truth or the meaning of things also shifts and ebbs and flows. And so you always have to kind of keep that neutral state to be able to evaluate things, because when you go into one direction or the other, I find as well, then emotion can come in, and when emotion comes in, it can be very easy to fall into one side of an argument versus another, and I'm just as guilty as that as anybody. And that's why I try to practice neutrality as well, so that it brings me to that center point. Much like if you're in an argument with somebody, you're going to do a lot better in an argument when you can remain neutral, because it helps you also just see the full spectrum of the conversation, versus getting highly emotional never really works out well. So,
Yeah. And the world is filled with people who are highly charged.
oh yeah,
They're highly charged about the position that they want to take, so much so that they would kill someone for it, or they would harm someone else. Um, and it's, again, interesting for those of us, an audience who can really understand what we're saying. And maybe there are some people who, have already turned us off because they're like, no, you know what? I don't believe in that. That means you're turning another cheek. And I get that, because the typical definition, if you will, of neutrality is to be passive. And yet, I'm a huge fan of etymology. And so the etymological term for neutrality, I had to look up, because that's, I'm like, well, what does it really mean? But it is a neutral. It says it's a neutral. This is 15 in the 1500s. Neutral attitude or position, the middle ground, which is what Chris was saying. Like, how can we be present in a way with someone who is not happy or upset with us or upset about something, and hold the space for them? I kind of see neutrality as being that. Um, it's in alchemy, composed of contrasting elements, which in proper proportion neutralizes each other. Very interesting, right? Um, Refraining from taking a side in a fight, not engaging or interfering with either side. Okay, well, um, it's also says neither one nor the other, neither of two, right? So there's that again. We know what we know. We know what we don't know. How about we take a step into a huge, the I don't know what I don't know discovery space in our infinite possibilities, and say, it could be somewhere in here, in a place that I don't know.